So good evening. Welcome to the first ever Opus 29 simulcast. I should, if everything's working okay, now be going live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube and on Twitter. So hopefully it's working. Hopefully the tech is online. I think there is a little slight delay between what I'm saying and what actually you will be hearing because it's being restreamed multiple times, but you can, if people are listening and watching, you can interact on the chat messages in whichever platform that you are looking at, and I can reply and respond. So just feel free to drop a question, a comment, or anything, or just to say hello, or anything random you'd like, and I can reply. Otherwise, I'm just quite happy to chat to myself, which is something I might have been doing quite a lot in lockdown. So yes, who'd have thought it? A few weeks ago, I would be simulcasting. I've learned so much over the last 4 weeks or so. Well, actually 8 weeks. I've learned podcasting, simulcasting. I've learned about trees. I've learned about a whole host of different things, which I've just been curious about and taken the time to do over the last few weeks whilst we've got the time. But anyway, tonight I thought I'd try something new. I've been trying a few different things on Facebook Live and other platforms just to sort of communicate and, share some of my thoughts, my research, my insights, to test the water a little bit, get some feedback maybe from people, and just to share a few things and see how things are shaping up and what I can do to maybe enhance my thinking, or maybe something I say will help you resolve something you've been thinking about, or just give you a different perspective on things. And so maybe I should just introduce myself for those of you who have not seen me before, not met me, or don't really know anything about me. So behind me even, you can see my, I suppose, business logo, which is Opus 29. But also my fundamental belief, which is that great people make amazing things happen. And that's something that really underpins everything I do in terms of my work, life, my research, my, general being maybe, that great people do make amazing things happen. But equally, actually, sometimes people need a little bit of support or help or guidance or something just to help them understand that they are great and what it means for them to be able to develop their own unique greatness and take it forward and follow their dreams. And you'll also see, maybe if you look at any of my website or my LinkedIn profile, my job title of Chaser of Dreams. And I think that's something quite key to what I do as well. It's about, dreams are out there. They're always big. Sometimes they feel a little bit scary. And it's not maybe enough sometimes to follow them. Sometimes you really need to put your head down and chase for all it's worth to try and get that dream. But perhaps need some guidance along the way in terms of working out what that dream maybe is, and maybe some of the steps along the way. And that's some of the things that I do through my work. So tonight I wanted to really talk a little bit around resilience and some of the things I've been thinking about, particularly maybe over the last few weeks or so. And what I've noticed for myself is that, I've spent a long while actually, looking at my, my values, my fundamental belief, but also the things that underpin that. For me, I have a series of 8 guiding principles, which include, well, actually I'll name 8 of them. This is a test for me to remember them. But my guiding principles are around curiosity, around courage, around creativity, connectedness. Those just happen to be 4 C's, the rest aren't C's. Also something very important to me about integrity, leadership, making a difference, and quality. So those are the guiding principles that really drive me in everything I do. And I've explored them a little bit more in terms of what that means in terms of behaviours, they're not just words on a bit of paper. And I've really tried to bring to life some of those things and what they mean to me underneath. With the belief that, and the hope actually, that when people meet me and see me or work with me, that's what they will see, so they know what to expect. And also it's a bit of a check, because integrity is really important. So what I say and what I do, I want to match, and being upfront about them is a good check and challenge, because if people see me not delivering against those, then we can have a conversation and perhaps I can learn a little bit more along the way. So I think it's important to start by acknowledging, as every good researcher will do, that what I'm going to talk about tonight and the next however many Wednesday nights, this is my perspective, it's my take on the world. And all of us have our own beliefs about how knowledge is created, about how the world works, And that's built up on all of our own experiences and likes, dislikes, preferences, all of those things. So, very much what I'm presenting is my view. It's one take on the world. I would like to think, and I do believe it's an informed take on the world through research, through experience, but it is just that. This is me looking out there and saying, okay, this is how I have made sense in this particular time of these particular things. And I don't know if anybody else, I've been watching Grace and Perry's Art Club on Channel 4, I think on a Monday night, and I found something quite cathartic and therapeutic about watching programs about art, and it's inspired me, having never drawn anything in my life, to really just take some time and try to draw. And I found, actually, I can draw things that look like what they're supposed to look like. But I really liked, I was watching I watched on Catch Up today, and there was a real sense. They were talking about perspective. The theme was view from my window. And all of these people were sending in very different pictures. And it's the whole idea that, we all see very different things. Even if we notice something different by looking out of our window, or we, focus on something different. Again, it's because of our experiences and who we are that directs what we see and what we notice. And again, that probably applies for me for this. And, hopefully what I'm going to talk about will prompt something in your head. So it just told me something had gone wrong, so I'm trying again. I'm hoping that it works. So I was mid-flow. Hopefully people would have seen that potentially. If not, never mind. I'll try again. The joys of technology. So yeah, I was in mid-flow saying, hopefully if there's something that you like or you take or you learn from, just as if you were writing in references in academic literature, maybe just reference where it came from, or pick up the, drop me an email to say hello, let me know what you've done with it, because again, that's part of that learning process in terms of what things spark in people's imagination. So anyway, that was a bit of an intro, and I won't go through all of those things every week, but I kind of felt it was important for the first one just to give you an insight into me and who I am, and some of the things that really drive and underpin my work going forward, and just getting an insight into me, I suppose. And so the theme for tonight is resilience and the Weeble theory, which is something that I have come up with over the past months, based through some of my research, but also work I do with coaches, through my mentoring in sport, different places, have just sort of prompted me to pull a few things together and start thinking about this idea of resilience in a slightly different way. And I just thought I'd start by offering you a few definitions that I have come across, and that anybody that Googles anything, you will find these. So a couple of definitions, which are dictionary definitions, defines resilience as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness. And a second definition is the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, elasticity. So there's a couple of different takes on things there in terms of the capacity to recover, but also the ability to spring back into shape of some sort. And I also find it interesting that as I was trawling through some of the literature, some people refer to resilience as a skill, others an attitude. You look and people talk about physical resilience, emotional resilience, mental resilience, psychological resilience, all of these different sorts of things. So there's very, very varying takes on resilience, dependent on the context. Also, I came across a couple of other phrases, which perhaps I'll share with you now just to read out. Resilience means knowing how to cope in spite of setbacks or barriers or limited resources. Resilience is a measure of how much you want something and how much you are willing and able to overcome obstacles to get to it. It has to do with your emotional strength. So that was sort of me paraphrasing a few things that I found on various websites, including Psychology Today, and just Googling define resilience. So some of that's come from dictionary definitions as well. And I also found it interesting that people talk about resilient people being aware of situations and aware of themselves, and very much self-awareness came up in a lot of the literature, the research, the articles talking about resilient people being aware of themselves, their emotions, their environment, their context, and having that real sense of awareness of what is going on in the world. And also, because of that, able to maintain a sort of sense of balance, and trying to keep control of a situation that potentially feels sometimes out with their control. So I found some of those quite interesting. I don't necessarily agree with all of them. I don't necessarily, sign up to each of those, but I just thought I'd present a few different takes on what resilience means when you come up into those, look at the definitions. And, interestingly, I find it quite interesting that, repeatedly people are saying resilience is not about never experiencing setbacks. It's not about going through life in a smooth, ordered, easy way. Resilience is much more to do with acknowledging, to start with, that life will have tough times, and that there will be trauma, there will be disaster potentially, there will be death, there will be injury if you're an athlete, there will be retirement maybe if you're an athlete or a person retiring from work. There will be things that come along that you weren't expecting. And again, particularly now, none of us probably at the start of this year expected that we would be sitting in week 8 or whatever it is of lockdown, having not seen friends or family, or potentially even been out of the house for that period of time. So unexpected things do happen, and resilience is not about not experiencing those. And for me, it's also not about just ignoring them and brushing them off and saying, I've just got to get on with this. Particularly from a sport perspective, and my a lot of my career I've spent working in sport and coaching, and often I would hear this phrase mental toughness and resilience sort of being used in the same way, and that really, I'm not yet entirely sure what I think of those things, because I think resilient people are mentally tough, but sometimes that mental toughness perhaps hides some of the cracks. Because there's sort of this expectation that we should keep our stiff upper lip and keep going regardless of what's going on. And I think that's why, again, making a link to this week, and this week is Mental Health Awareness Week, I think there's something in there really interesting about that, coming back to that self-awareness idea, that resilient people are aware of their own emotions and aware of how they're feeling and what's happening to them. Whereas if potentially you're maybe just mentally tough and just ploughing forward and not taking note of those things, then actually in the long run that can be quite damaging. So just a couple of other things to throw in before I start talking about my Weeble theory. Resilience, something I did come across around the definition, is around the ability to withstand adversity, bounce back and grow despite challenges. And that for me really resonated, that word "and grow." So this is about experiencing tough times, experiencing adversity potentially, maybe it knocking you down for a little while, but resilience is then about being able to pick yourself up and learn from that experience and grow because of that. So rather than boxing it off and forgetting about it and saying, no, okay, it didn't happen to me, I'm just going to move forward, it's maybe that, again, coming back to that sense of awareness and understanding what's happened and why it's happened, and how potentially you can then learn from it and grow and move forward. And those sorts of things really struck a chord with me. And this idea that resilience also is something that we can learn potentially, and can we? That's a big question. Can we learn to be more resilient? And I think that's maybe a question for each of us to ponder. And in terms of our own perspectives, there's a whole host of, if you again look on various websites, there's the seven C's of resilience. There's somebody else that says 5 C's of resilience. There's somebody else that says here's six factors that promote resilience. There's lots of different approaches in terms of again what's out there, and some of them will align with you, resonate with you more than others. And I think it's probably quite important for each of us to find something that works. And that, I suppose, brings me on to my Weeble theory, which, for those of you who maybe grew up in the 70s and early 80s, you'll be familiar with the Weeble, which was a little toy, which this is a modern day Weeble. So I tried on to get hold of one, and the 70s, 80s ones were very expensive. I think they were retro toys even. So this is my new friend from Paw Patrol. Now, I don't watch Paw Patrol, so I'm not entirely sure who this is. My 6-year-old niece did tell me at one point, but I sadly forgot his name. So if anybody's actually watching me, who knows? And you do know who this little chap is, then perhaps you can just let me know, or I'll double check for next time. But anyway, look, this is a Weeble, and people who remember the originals will probably remember a more egg-shaped toy with strange-looking hair. And I seem to remember having a Weeble bus. and Weeble Play Park, and all sorts of things that you slotted the Weebles in, and it did literally look like you were putting eggs in an egg box. But this is my little Weeble, and you know the strap line for people, probably if you know the Weeble, immediately what is probably coming into your head is the fact that Weebles wobble but they don't fall down. And those are the words that really started to feel meaningful to me when I was thinking about resilience. And so as I do, I went on a bit of a mission to find out more about the Weeble. And not just, you know, where they came from and who designed them and all those sorts of things. Although I have to confess, I did look and see if I could find a marketing link to person at the Weeble makers to see if I could get a link. But I wasn't brave enough to send them a message on LinkedIn. But I looked into it, and my naive assumption when I looked at Weebles was that they had this big weight, lead weight or something in the bottom of them, which was fixed in the bottom here, that meant they would always stand upright. Nice weight. But when I looked into it, what I discovered was that actually what's inside a Weeble are two liquids of differing, now this is where my technical knowledge maybe lets me down a little, different densities, different weights. But anyway, there are two liquids in here, one of which is heavier than the other. And they are free within this little bowl at the bottom. And so when you knock a Weeble down, what happens is the two liquids mix. And, you know, for a while they will kind of wobble around and just sort of mix and mesh around and mush together. And eventually what will happen is your little Weeble, the heavy liquid, will sink back to the bottom and mean that Mr. Weeble, Mr. Paw Patrol Weeble in this case, is upright. So I'm just going to use my current reading, Invisible Women, just to show you, because in case anybody who doesn't or isn't familiar with Weebles. So, oops, you knock him over, and eventually the Weeble will right itself back to the middle. And I got thinking about that afterwards, thinking, well, okay, that makes sense now, because if it was a heavy, solid, fixed weight, perhaps it wouldn't, you know, it would maybe just leap back up again and it wouldn't wobble around. And I started thinking about that in terms of resilience, because we often talk about resilience in terms of bouncing back, bounce back ability, you know, getting back on the horse, getting back on the bike, those sorts of things, and keeping going. And maybe some of you have been watching SAS Are You Tough Enough on Channel 4 at the moment, and that was the subject, the theme for that was resilience this week, and that was very much about just keeping going, keeping your head down. Yes, it hurt, but just keep going. And for me, that was, you know, a bit of physical resilience, because yes, it hurt, so you had to keep going. But there was a lot around that psychological resilience, and almost that ability to push things back and just keep going. So kind of that did feel like sort of almost this Weeble jumping straight back up. But then I started thinking about other setbacks in life when, you know, perhaps we don't know where we're going, and we feel like our whole world has been knocked off course and knocked off kilter, and maybe we spend quite a lot of time wobbling around like this. And what is it, for me, what is it then that brings us gradually back to our centre and gives us that sense of stability? And in my research that I've done for my PhD, there was a lot that came out in terms of sense of identity, a lot in terms of values, beliefs, you know, real core understanding of who you are, but also self-awareness of who you are. And so that linked for me with a lot of the resilience literature in terms of that idea of awareness of self and environment. But also I then started bringing in some of the identity literature and work on, you know, in coaching, sports coaching, you know, we do a lot of work on coaching philosophy and encourage coaches really to understand their reason for being, their drivers, their why. Simon Sinek talks about the golden circles, and then, you know, start with why and those sorts of things. So what is your fundamental reason for being? And that for me felt like the heavy liquid in the little Weeble here, in terms of, you know, it develops over time. It's not something that's fixed and weighty, and it does shift. So who we are, what we believe, and how we see the world does gradually maybe shift and mould over time. But in there somewhere are some real core values, fundamentals, and principles that define who we are as a person. And unless we are aware of those, then maybe our liquid inside is all the same weight. And so we just keep wobbling around forever. So I'm thinking particularly around, I wrote a piece a little while ago around transitions. I've got friends who were elite athletes and had to transition quickly out of their sport because they got injured and almost were left with a sense of, but I don't know who I am because I was, Jim, the fencing champion, and now I'm, I don't know who I am. Equally, thinking of corporate executives, for example, who maybe have gone through and have a really high profile, high powered job, and then, we do hear stories of people retiring and within a few months, just losing their sense of self and knowing what their purpose is. And I think that sort of idea of being defined by, your job or your role or whatever, it just highlighted the importance of having something underneath that, which was, okay, who am I as a person? And certainly my PhD research into effective change leaders really revealed, or I constructed a theme that was called I Know Who I Am. And all of them through their stories really talked about this sense of self, of knowing who they were. And the fact that they knew who they were gave them sort of a sense of moral courage, if you like, to be able to move forward and do things. And in terms of my Weeble here, I think it's that is the heavy liquid. So, we go through life and things are okay, and then suddenly something comes along and knocks us off balance. And we just wobble round and we don't know where we are. And at different paces for all of us, depending on what's going on, we will gradually rewrite ourselves. And I think the more sure or certain we can be about that core and what is at the source of our heavy liquid weight, potentially the quicker we will be able to right ourselves. The other thing that I think probably for me it's important to acknowledge and express is that often resilience isn't just about jumping straight back on. So sometimes in some contexts, we talk about get straight back on the bike or get straight back on the horse, just to keep going and not lose your confidence. In other circumstances, perhaps resilience, and this is something I'm toying with, I suppose, perhaps resilience is about knowing how long to stay knocked down and how long to stay just looking after yourself in that sort of safe zone, maybe, where you're kind of just, okay, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to look after myself, and I trust that eventually I will get back to this point, but actually just right now I need to be just spending a little bit of time bouncing around. And I think that comes back to self-awareness, and also awareness of your environment. So using a very practical analogy, if my friend Weeble is on a solid, which is a book, but on a very solid ground, then actually writing themselves is fairly easy because the ground underneath you is very solid. Now imagine if that's quicksand or mud or, a soft, I've got in my head a soft, one of those foam pits in a gymnasium. You haven't got that grounding underneath to be able to roll against and come back. So again, it's awareness not just of yourself and what's important to you and the fundamental core that you have inside you, but also about what's going on around you. So I think about our context now is there's so much uncertainty around what's happening with coronavirus and, when lockdown's going to end, when are we going to be able to go back out and meet people, all of those sorts of things. There's so much uncertainty that perhaps in those times, it does inevitably take a little longer for us to get back to our upright and okay self. And I think that's important. For me, that's really important right now, is that, it might take us a little while to come back. So that's 20 odd minutes I've been rabbiting on to you and just sharing some ideas. And I think just to maybe draw some of these things to a conclusion and highlight a few core things, because I still have no idea if anybody's watching. I haven't had any messages, so who knows, I could be rabbiting to myself. But if you're watching this on watch again, play again, whatever it might be, then thank you. But just, I suppose, a few summary conclusions to me. So, what is resilience? And resilience for me is about the ability to experience adversity, acknowledge adversity, and have a sense of self-awareness that enables you to recognise how you're feeling, what's going on in the world, and kind of having that sort of, if we were using sports physiology, exercise physiology words, we'd talk about proprioception and kinesthesis, that I know where I am in the world, I know where I'm positioned. And I think there is something in that sort of ability to know what's going on around you. at the heart for me is that sense of self and sense of identity. Do you really know what is important to you and what is in that core heavy liquid that is going to eventually, okay, it might get knocked and we might suffer, just real knockbacks in life that actually mean we completely lose our sense of self for a while. But if we know it's there and we trust it's there, then eventually that heavy liquid, which is our sense of self, our sense of being and our values, will bring us to that upright. And, a practical example for me is, I've had days, weeks over the past couple of months where, I've sat there and thought, what is the point? How are we going to get through this? I miss my family. I'm not traveling as much as I'm used to. This is the longest period I think I've ever just been at home without even being away for a night working and those sorts of things. So, and what I've found is revisiting my, core belief, great people make amazing things happen, and my guiding principles in terms of saying, okay, these things are really important to me. And creativity particularly has been a really valuable tool for me to keep myself motivated and developing new ideas, hence the simulcast, over the past few weeks. So, it is something that I believe in and I'm trying to put into practice. But there we go. Thank you, anybody who has been able to find me, listen, log on. I'm always happy to have conversations about some of my thinking and research and ideas. You can find me on the platforms that you're watching me on, but effectively I'm on Twitter and YouTube on the handle of @Opus29Jane. LinkedIn, I'm Dr. Jane Booth. Facebook, Jane Booth. And failing all that, you can find my website, which is www.opus29, spelt as in up there, .co.uk. And, genuinely would love to hear feedback, thoughts, reflections, questions. And I'm always up for a virtual coffee and conversation in lieu of being able to actually pick up the phone and arrange to meet in a very nice coffee shop somewhere in due course. So thank you for watching. Keep wobbling, don't fall down, and you'll find your centre again eventually. And if anybody does know what this little chap's called, let me know, because I have completely forgotten. So thank you very much. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you same time, same place next week. Bye.